Think about the last time you couldn't sleep. Or maybe your knee was acting up.
Right, and you just finally tave and go see a medical professional.
Exactly. And there is a very specific, almost comforting choreography to that entire experience today.
Oh, absolutely.
You sit on the edge of that exam table
With the crinkly paper.
with the crinkly paper, yeah. And they strap the blood pressure cuff on you. Maybe they run a standardized lab panel to, look for biomarkers.
It's a very clean binary process.
Right. And then at the end of this incredibly sterile visit, they hand you a prescription. And it's usually for a highly synthesized, microscopic chemical compound designed to target one very specific cellular receptor.
Yeah, I mean, it is the ultimate localized strike. Modern medicine views the human body essentially as a highly complex machine with distinct separate parts.
Like a car engine.
Exactly. If a gear is squeaking, we apply a very specific isolated lubricant to that one gear.
We treat the isolated symptom.
We do, usually with a standardized pill, and we expect a fast, measurable, almost instantaneous result.
And look, we are incredibly lucky to have that. But I want you to completely erase that sterile, microscopic view of the body from your mind for the next hour.
Because today, we are stepping into a radically different reality.
We really are. We are doing a deep dive into excerpts from a massive, incredibly detailed historical medical treatise. Specifically, we are focusing on how they managed the health of the elderly and bodies that were fundamentally out of balance.
Which they call distempered bodies.
Right. So imagine you were living centuries ago. You walk into a healer's quarters. It smells of dried herbs, fermented oils, burning resin.
Very different from the sterile clinic.
Totally. And you complain about a persistent, throbbing ache in your left leg. The practitioner doesn't look at your knee. They look at your complexion.
They ask about your sleep.
Yeah. They stroke their chin and say, well, I see the problem. I need you to go outside and start throwing heavy stones with your upper body immediately.
And before you can even process that, they follow it up by instructing you to drink a very specific draught of donkey's milk mixed with salt.
Right. But you must drink it exclusively at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
And only, this is crucial, only if the donkey producing the milk hasn't been grazing on spicy plants.
It sounds like pure fantasy.
Right.
Or just the rambling of a madman.
It really does to our modern ears.
But what we are looking at today is neither of those things. It is a profoundly systematic, deeply logical, and shockingly holistic view of human biology.
We just have to completely abandon our modern understanding of cells and germs.
Exactly. We have to look at the human body through a macroscopic, almost environmental lens. To really understand why anyone would prescribe stone throwing for a bad leg, we have to start at the foundation.
The biological baseline.
Right. How did the authors of this text actually view the human body? What is the baseline we are operating from here?
Well, to understand the baseline, you have to think like an ancient meteorologist rather than a modern biologist.
Okay, meteorologist.
Yeah. This classical medical text views health as a delicate, constantly shifting balance of elemental forces, which we can call reactants. Right. Specifically, they were obsessed with two axes, the balance between wetness and dryness and the balance of temperature. So, heat and cold.
So the body is literally a localized climate.
A literal ecosystem. I mean, everything you experience, the physical reality of aging, sickness, a sudden fever, weight gain, joint pain, is simply a result of these elemental forces shifting out of their natural, healthy equilibrium.
So health is just equilibrium.
Exactly. And disease is a deviation from that perfect internal climate, which, as you mentioned, they called a dystemperament.
If you were walking around with a perfect balance, your weather is pleasant and temperate.
Like a nice spring day.
Right. But if something pushes you into being too hot and dry, you are experiencing one set of severe internal weather conditions.
A drought.
And too cold and wet, and you're experiencing a completely different storm.
And the physician's entire job is to track those internal weather fronts and introduce opposing elements to gently nudge the body's climate back to a temperate state.
So they aren't fighting a germ.
No, they're fighting a bad season inside your body.
That is such a fascinating way to look at it. Which brings us to how they viewed the most inevitable, natural biological process of all aging.
Yes. The text dedicates an enormous amount of space to the health management of the elderly.
And the overarching, non-negotiable theme here is that getting older is fundamentally a process of drying out and cooling down.
It is the core physiological mechanism of their entire geriatric theory.
Make that make sense for me. How does that work?
Well, in this paradigm, you start your life as a baby in the ultimate state of heat and moisture.
Okay.
Think of a newborn as a flourishing, bright green, incredibly plump seedling, but living just the sheer act of breathing, moving, existing requires fuel.
And the fuel is that innate baby moisture.
Exactly. As time passes, your inner fire slowly burns through the body's natural reserves. You inevitably dry out.
So you are basically consuming your own moisture just by being alive.
Yes. And as you lose that crucial moisture, the fire itself has less fuel, so your innate heat begins to fade.
I'm picturing like a log in a fireplace.
That's a great image.
When you first throw a fresh piece of wood on the fire, it's full of sap. It hisses, it burns incredibly hot, it's vibrant.
Right, it has all that internal moisture.
But eventually, the sap is burned away, the wood dries out, and the roaring flame reduces to this dry, cool, fragile, gray ash.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. An elderly body in this text is that brittle ash. The inner fire is flickering and the moisture is gone.
Wow.
Because of that structural reality, the absolute primary goal of any health management for an older person is a relentless, meticulous battle to counteract that drying and cooling.
The text explicitly states that treating the elderly lies entirely in the combined use of moisturizing and warming foods, drinks, and baths.
They're acting like caretakers for a dried-out sponge.
Desperately trying to keep it hydrated and warm so it doesn't just crumble.
Exactly.
But the actual lifestyle prescriptions they give to achieve this are so fascinating. Let's look at their sleep advice.
Oh, this is a great part.
The text says, older people require extended sleep by staying in bed longer than young people. Now, today we might say, sure, older people get tired.
Right, it seems like common sense.
But what is the actual mechanical medical benefit of sleeping in, according to this ancient system?
It comes down to a concept they call the animalistic faculty.
The animalistic faculty.
This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. In this classical view, your body isn't just a meat machine. It is powered by vital faculties or spirits that govern different operations.
Like an internal energy source.
Right. The animalistic faculty is the vital energy that drives physical movement, muscle action, and even nervous system response.
Okay, so it's the body's active battery power.
Let's run with that battery analogy. In a young person full of heat, that battery charges quickly and holds a massive charge.
Makes sense.
But in an older person, because that innate internal fire is so low, the animalistic faculty is sluggish. It takes a much longer time to gather its strength and distribute itself throughout the body.
So by staying in bed longer, they are just giving it more time to charge.
Exactly. They are allowing their weak internal heat to slowly accumulate, pool, and penetrate their cold limbs before demanding any exertion from them.
Oh, I see. If they jump out of bed at the crack of dawn like a 20-year-old, they are forcing a cold engine to rev at maximum capacity.
And they risk completely depleting that fragile reserve of heat. They have to let the engine idle and warm up under the blankets.
It makes total logical sense within their system.
It really does.
But then I hit a section that completely derailed me.
Uh-oh.
The text gives strict orders regarding bathroom habits. It mandates the constant induction of urine and the absolute necessity of evacuating phlegm from the stomach through the intestines and bladder.
Ah, yes. The evacuation protocols.
I have to push back on this. If the entire premise is that the elderly body is a dried-out, brittle sponge that desperately needs moisture, why in the world is there a massive medical focus on constantly inducing urination and flushing fluids out of the body?
It seems counterintuitive.
Aren't they just dehydrating the patient faster?
That is the exact paradox that trips up a lot of people when they first read classical medicine. You have to differentiate between types of moisture.
Or there are different types?
Yes. The elderly fundamentally lack healthy, innate, vital moisture. But remember what we said about their internal fire?
It's incredibly weak.
Right. Because their heat is so low, their digestive and metabolic processes are failing. They are no longer fully cooking their food into healthy, vibrant blood and living tissue.
So what happens to the food if it isn't cooked properly in the stomach?
It turns into sludge.
Oh, gross.
This weak, low-temperature digestion produces massive amounts of raw, cold, and sticky waste products, specifically abnormal phlegm and dense black bile.
So it is not that they have too much water overall, it's that they are accumulating the wrong kind of wetness.
Precisely.
They are filled with cold, stagnant swamp water instead of a fresh, warm spring.
Stagnant is the perfect word. Because the body's natural heat isn't strong enough to burn these thick wastes away or push them out naturally, the physician has to step in and manually run the plumbing.
Manually run the plumbing. I love that.
Well, if you leave that cold, sticky phlegm sitting in the stomach or coating the intestines, it acts like a wet blanket.
It smothers the fire.
It will literally extinguish the body's remaining internal heat. And worse, it will block the absorption of any good, healthy moisture you try to give them.
You can't fill a cup that's already full of mud.
Exactly.
You have to evacuate the bad, cold moisture to make physical room for the good, warm moisture.
You have to dredge the swamp before you can irrigate the fields. That's why clearing the bladder and the bowels is a daily medical imperative.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about how they actually tried to introduce that good moisture from the outside once the plumbing was cleared.
The external treatments.
Right. The text outlines highly specific, almost ritualistic rules for massaging the elderly.
Very strict rules.
First of all, it insists the massage must be moderate in both quality and quantity. They are absolutely forbidden from aggressively massaging weak organs or the bladder.
Think about the mechanics there. A weak organ in an elderly person is barely holding on to its vital heat.
It's fragile.
Right. If you apply a vigorous, deep tissue sports massage to it, you would overwhelm the organ, physically dispersing and scattering what little heat it has left.
And the bladder.
Well, as we just discussed, the bladder is the primary collection zone for those cold, toxic wastes. If you massage the bladder too aggressively, you risk irritating it or accidentally squeezing those cold wastes back up into the cleaner parts of the system.
That makes sense. But the detail that really stuck with me is the actual tactile process of the massage.
The materials they use.
Yeah. If someone is having multiple massages, the text dictates it should be done with a rough cloth and bare hands.
A very specific combination.
And then, only after that friction, they apply a generous amount of moderately warm perfume and rub with oil after sleep to stimulate the animalistic faculty. The staging of this is wild to me.
The sequencing is the entire magic of the therapy. Let's break down the rough cloth.
Why use something abrasive on fragile elderly skin?
Because elderly skin, by their definition, is cold, dry, and tight. The pores are essentially clamped shut against the cold.
Oh, I see.
By aggressively rubbing the skin with a rough cloth, you create physical friction,
You're literally generating heat on the surface.
generating local heat and mechanically drawing the blood from the deeper, colder parts of the body up to the surface. You are waking the skin up and forcing the pores to dilate.
It's like taking sandpaper to a glossy surface before you paint it. You are prepping the canvas to absorb the treatment.
That's exactly what they are doing. You force the pores open with friction, and then, while the skin is hot and open, you flood it with the warm perfume and the oil.
And they just soak it up.
The open pores drink in the heavy moisture of the oil and the active, warming botanical essence of the perfume, and they explicitly recommend doing this right after sleep.
Because, going back to our earlier point, that's when the animalistic faculty is well rested but still sluggish from lying in bed.
Right. It needs a gentle, warming, external stimulation to prepare for the physical demands of the day, like walking or riding.
That is so methodical.
The text actually makes a profound claim here. It notes this specific sequence of friction, perfume, and oil prevents the relapse of organ sicknesses.
By building a literal shield of heat and moisture on the skin, it's external armor against the internal cold.
It is preventative medicine applied directly to the epidermis.
I just love how everything connects. But as the text quickly points out, external moisturizing through baths and oil rubs is really only half the battle.
You can't just treat the outside.
Right, you can oil the outside of the sponge all day, but true, vital hydration has to happen from the inside out.
And doing that requires an incredibly strict and, frankly, bizarre culinary schedule.
This moves us out of the bedroom and into the kitchen.
This is where we see the absolute precision of this medical art. For these practitioners, food wasn't just calories or macros, it was literal pharmacology.
The line between diet and medicine just did not exist.
Not at all.
And the scheduling of the medicine is rigid. The text dictates that all food must be divided into small portions. Then it lays out this exact timetable for an elderly patient.
Let's hear it.
At 3 p.m. in the afternoon, they should eat good bread with honey.
Okay.
At 7 p.m. in the evening, immediately after bathing, they're instructed to eat something that softens the bowels.
Right.
And finally, at dark, they eat good, nutritious food.
Let's look at the underlying engineering of that schedule, because it makes perfect sense for a body with a flickering internal fire.
How so?
If you dump a massive, heavy, modern-style dinner into a weak stomach, the internal fire will be smothered instantly.
Like throwing a massive log on a tiny ember?
Exactly. It is literally like throwing a massive, dense oak log onto a tiny, flickering ember. The ember dies. So small portions are a physical necessity.
Okay, so what is the strategy behind the 3 p.m. bread and honey?
Honey, in their pharmacopoeia, is intrinsically warming, slightly moist, and incredibly easy for the body to break down.
And the bread.
Good bread provides a stabilizing substance, so the honey doesn't just flash burn through the system. It is a highly digestible, warming packet of fuel meant to give their sluggish metabolism a mid-afternoon boost without taxing the stomach's limited energy.
Okay, then we hit the 7 p.m. bowel softener. This goes right back to what we were talking about earlier with the plumbing.
You clear the digestive tract before the main event. You use a gentle food to lubricate the intestines and flush out any of that cold phlegm that accumulated during the day.
Because you need a clean environment for the real food.
Exactly. Because when the good, nutritious food arrives at dark, it needs a clean environment. If the stomach is full of stagnant sludge, the good food will mix with the sludge and become corrupted.
They're sending down a squeaking crew before they deliver the actual cargo.
That's a great way to put it.
And then they sleep on that nutritious food, allowing the slow, low-burning overnight heat of the body to carefully extract its value while they rest.
It's a beautifully orchestrated conveyor belt of digestion.
So let's talk about what actually constitutes good food for this age group, because this is where the text gets delightfully specific.
Yeah, it gets very specific.
Milk is highly praised. The text says it induces sleep and moisturizes. But not just any milk you can buy at the market.
No, absolutely not.
The absolute premium milk, according to the text, is the milk of goats, and even more specifically, donkeys.
The fixation on donkey's milk is one of the most fascinating aspects of classical dietary medicine.
The text says donkey's milk does not curdle easily and is fast to digest, especially if mixed with salt and honey.
Salt and honey.
I want the listener to really picture this right now. Imagine it's 3 p.m., you aren't feeling well, and your doctor hands you a warm cup of salty, honey-sweetened donkey milk.
It sounds like a bizarre dare today.
It really does.
Yeah.
But to them, this was top-tier, life-saving medicine. Why donkey milk over cow milk?
To understand this, you have to picture what they thought was happening inside the stomach. They believed that the stomach functioned like a cheese-making vat.
Okay, a cheese vat.
When you drink milk, the natural acids and the heat of the stomach act on it. If milk stays in a weak, low-heat stomach for too long, it curdles.
It denatures.
Exactly. It turns into something thick, cheesy, cold, and profoundly obstructing to the internal plumbing.
It turns into the exact kind of sticky phlegm they're trying to avoid.
Exactly. Now, through observation, they realized that donkey's milk is physically thinner, more watery, and much less prone to heavy coagulation than cow's milk.
So it won't turn into cheese.
Because it doesn't curdle into thick cheese easily, it passes through the stomach rapidly.
And the additives, the salt and the honey, what are they doing?
Pure chemical engineering. Adding a pinch of salt gives the milk a cutting quality. The salt physically cuts through any residual mucus or phlegm in the stomach, ensuring the milk doesn't stick to the walls.
And the honey warms it up.
Right. The honey adds the necessary warming element to counteract any natural chill in the milk. You are creating a fast-moving, non-stick, warming hydration potion.
That is so wild. And their attention to detail doesn't stop at the animal species. They actually regulate the donkey.
They do.
The text explicitly warns that the animal providing the milk should not graze on pungent, hot, acidic, or salty plants. The medicine you are drinking is entirely dependent on the diet of the animal producing it.
Which demonstrates an incredible intuitive understanding of the food chain and pharmacology. They understood that the active compounds in plants are transferred through lactation.
You can't separate the medicine from the source.
You cannot separate the medicine from its source environment. If the donkey eats a hot, drying plant, the milk becomes hot and drying, which ruins the moisturizing effect for the patient.
Wow. The other foods on the good list are just as rigorously controlled. Leafy vegetables like chard, celery, and a little leek are recommended.
But there's a catch.
A huge catch. If you think you can just give an elder a crisp, raw garden salad, you are severely mistaken. The text mandates that these vegetables must be cooked in murrey and oil, especially before the main course, to help in digestion. Let's talk about murrey because that is a very specific flavor profile.
Murray is a fascinating historical condiment. It was a fermented liquid, usually made from barley or wheat, that had been allowed to mold and ferment over months, often flavored with spices.
That sounds intense.
It was incredibly salty, pungent, and complex, very similar in use and umami profile to an ancient soy sauce or the Roman fish sauce, garum.
Okay, so why are we boiling our celery in ancient soy sauce?
Because raw vegetables in this elemental system are generally considered overwhelmingly cold and wet.
And we know cold and wet is bad for the elderly.
If you give a bowl of cold, raw celery to an old person whose internal fire is already dying out, you are going to extinguish their digestive fire completely. It's like throwing wet leaves on a struggling campfire.
But if you process it,
Exactly.
yeah.
You boil it, which breaks down the dense, cold fibers. Then you cook it in oil, which provides a warming, lasting moisture.
And then the Murray.
And finally, you add the Murray, which, because it is fermented and pungent, is deeply penetratingly hot in its temperament.
You chemically transformed it.
Through cooking, you have chemically transformed the plant. You've stripped away its dangerous coldness, retained its inherent moisture, and used it as a delivery vehicle for the heat of the oil and Murray.
Serving it before the main course literally greases the wheels of the digestive tract, preparing it for heavier food.
It is alchemy in a frying pan.
Another great example of this tightrope walk is ginger jam. The text declares ginger jam is a good medication for them, and so are other hot jams.
But wait for the caveat.
Yeah, there's this fascinating, almost philosophical caveat attached. It says, these hot jams should be ingested according to the heat they generate and the digestion they promote, and not according to the dryness they incur. I'd read that 3 times. What is the logic there?
This perfectly illustrates the risk-benefit analysis that defined classical medicine. Ginger is an incredibly potent, intensely hot botanical,
Okay.
but critically, it is also very drying.
Right. And drying is the ultimate enemy of the elderly body.
Ordinarily, you would never want to give a highly drying substance to a body that is already turning to ash. It contradicts the golden rule.
So why do it?
But the physician has to make a calculated trade-off. The sluggish stomach of the elder desperately needs a massive influx of heat to process food and create blood. The benefit of the intense, localized heat ginger provides to the digestive process vastly outweighs the slight systemic penalty of its dryness.
It's a calculated risk.
The text is essentially saying, yes, we acknowledge it might dry them out a tiny bit, but the massive metabolic boost it provides makes it a necessary evil.
That makes total sense. You take a slight hit to your moisture stat to get a massive buff to your digestion stat.
Exactly.
Which leads us perfectly into the bad foods list. As you would expect, they are told to completely avoid dense food that generates black bile and phlegm, which we know causes blockages.
Right.
They are told to avoid sharp-biting food like pickles and heavy spices, which are too harsh for a weak stomach. And they are warned against salty foods like eggplant, dried meat, and hard fish.
Because salt is fundamentally drying, pulling the precious radical moisture out of the tissues.
Exactly. But then there's a restriction that just completely blew my modern mind.
The fruit restriction.
The text explicitly lists watermelon and cucumber as foods the elderly should never, ever eat.
It's shocking, isn't it?
If you ask anyone today what to eat if you are dehydrated, watermelon and cucumber are at the top of the list. They are mostly water.
They are.
If the overarching, desperate goal of this entire medical branch is to moisturize the dry, elderly body, why are the 2 most water-dense fruits on Earth on the banned list? Make that make sense.
It feels like a massive contradiction, doesn't it? If you need water, eat a watermelon. But you have to view the watermelon through the lens of their elemental system, not our nutritional one.
Okay.
The goal isn't just to dump generic liquid into the body. The text clearly states the diet must be warming and moisturizing.
Warming being the key word.
Watermelon and cucumber are undeniably wet, but they are intrinsically fundamentally cold in their temperament.
Ah, the temperature of the moisture matters just as much as the wetness.
It matters more. If you put a heavy, cold, wet substance like a raw cucumber into a weak, cold stomach, the body cannot absorb that moisture.
Why not?
The stomach doesn't have the heat to process or cook the cucumber into usable hydration. Instead, that heavy, cold water just sits in the stomach, stagnates, and quickly corrupts into raw, abnormal phlegm.
It's like pouring a bucket of ice water onto a struggling fire. You didn't hydrate the fire, you killed it.
Precisely. The elderly need hot, active moisture, like the warm oil, the honey, the freshly drawn donkey milk, not dead, cold moisture from a melon.
But the authors of the text are remarkably realistic. They know human nature. They know an older person is going to eventually cave and eat a pickle or a slice of watermelon.
Right, people are going to cheat on their diets.
So the text provides contingency plans. It says if an elder makes a mistake and eats from the first type of bad foods, like the cold watermelon or drying eggplant, or the second type, like pickles, sardines, or standard cow's milk, they must immediately be treated with what the text calls antagonists or soothers.
The concept of the antagonist is brilliant. It is dietary counter-warfare.
Counter-warfare.
If you accidentally ingest a substance that is dangerously cold and wet, you do not wait for it to ruin your digestion. You must immediately consume a targeted antagonist.
Something opposite.
Right, something potently hot and dry to neutralize the threat before it can corrupt your humors.
And if they fail to neutralize it in time, and it becomes obvious that they have a buildup of toxic waste from this bad food, the physician has to deploy the heavy artillery.
The laxatives.
Yes. The specificity of the pharmacological dosing here is staggering. To evacuate the bowels, they prescribe boiling a plant called liblab, which is a historical type of climbing bean or ivy, or using cabbage water or safflower pith mixed with barley milk.
But the resin is the best part.
My absolute favorite is the prescription for pistachio resin. The text says to administer the amount of 1 walnut or 2, no more than 3, which is roughly 18.72 grams of pistachio resin. This will evacuate the bowels without any harm.
The dosing instructions for the resin show how advanced their practical pharmacology was.
They measured it down to the decimal, 18.72 grams, not 19 grams, not 20 grams. They map the exact threshold where this tree resin goes from being a helpful, gentle laxative to a violently dangerous purge.
And that extreme caution with dosing is tied directly to a very strict, overarching medical warning in the text.
Which is?
Evacuation in the elderly must be as possible without venesection.
Venesection being bloodletting. Which is wild because opening a vein and bleeding people was the absolute cornerstone of medical practice for centuries.
It was the universal treatment for almost everything.
So why avoid it for the elderly?
The logic of why they forbid it for the elderly is deeply consistent. For a young, hot-blooded person suffering from a raging fever, opening a vein to let out the excess, boiling blood and heat was viewed as a necessary pressure release valve.
Like letting steam out of a radiator.
But for the elderly, their blood is their literal life force. It is the last remaining reservoir of their innate heat and radical moisture.
If you bleed an old person, you are quite literally draining the battery dry.
You are stealing the one thing keeping them alive. So the text concludes that moderate diarrhea is more suitable.
That makes total sense.
It's a safer mechanical intervention. It removes the physical, solid waste, blocking the digestive tract without puncturing the vascular system and depleting the vital living fluids.
So we've navigated the culinary minefield of food and the precise deployment of laxatives. But we cannot talk about classical dietary medicine without talking about wine.
The wine.
The text dedicates an entire section to the wine of the elderly. And the rule is absolute. The best wine for them is aged red wine, which is diuretic and warming together.
Here again, we see a substance prized for its dual action.
Warming and diuretic.
According to their philosophy of fermentation, aging a red wine deepens and concentrates its inherent heat. It becomes a potent liquid fire.
So it's like a metabolic boost.
When consumed in moderation, it provides that vital internal flame necessary to aid a weak stomach and digestion. And the fact that it naturally acts as a diuretic is a massive secondary benefit.
Because it actively helps flush out those cold, watery wastes from the kidneys and bladder that we were trying to clear earlier.
Exactly.
But the warnings are severe. They're strictly ordered to avoid the young and white wine.
Because young white wine is seen as raw.
Right. Unmatured and lacking the deep heat of an aged red. It is fundamentally colder and wetter. The text does offer one bizarre exception, though.
Oh, the bathing exception.
It says, unless they have bathed after eating and felt thirsty. In this case, they should drink light wine with little nutritious value. However, this is not a substitute for water.
Very specific.
And above all else, they must fundamentally avoid sweet and obstructive drinks.
The prohibition against sweet, thick, syrupy drinks is absolutely critical. In their fluid dynamics, thick, sweet liquids are slow-moving.
Like syrup.
In a cold body, they congeal. And when fluids congeal in the vessels, they create the next major life-threatening medical crisis in this paradigm.
The obstruction.
The obstruction.
Which transitions us from managing daily maintenance into active crisis management. What happens when the body's internal plumbing actually gets blocked up We are moving into the protocols for opening obstructions in the elderly.
An obstruction in this classical medical system is a literal physical blockage occurring within the vessels, the veins, or the coarse tissues of a vital organ.
What causes it?
It is almost always caused by thick, viscous, corrupted humors, like dense, gluey phlegm or baked, melancholic black bile getting stuck in a narrow passage.
Like sludge clogging a pipe under the sink.
Exactly. And when an organ's pathways are obstructed, the vital spirits and fresh blood cannot reach it. The organ begins to starve, suffocate, and ultimately fail.
The text notes that the easiest of these obstructions to resolve are the ones caused by drinking alcohol.
Right.
Now, based on what we just learned, that implies a very specific type of alcohol, likely those sweet, thick, unaged wines they were just warned against, which have congealed in the liver or vessels.
And the treatment protocol for this is essentially a full-scale assault from the spice cabinet.
It really is. To break the blockage, they prescribe pennyroyal peppery oxymals, which is a sharp, potent mixture of vinegar and honey, or literally just dumping heavy black pepper directly into their wine.
And if the patient is strong,
If the patient has a strong constitution, they prescribe raw garlic and onion.
if you look at the shared botanical characteristics of those remedies, pepper, garlic, onion, pennyroyal, vinegar, they all share one functional profile.
Which is?
They are violently hot, sharp, and physically penetrating. The mechanical logic is identical to how you would treat a clogged drain today.
You are sending a concentrated chemical blast of heat to melt and dissolve the thick, cold, sticky obstruction.
It's liquid drain cleaner.
And for more serious, deeply entrenched blockages, they don't mess around. They bring out the legendary heavy artillery. They mention using the antidote, commonly known in history as teriac or theriac.
Teriac is one of the most famous compound medicines in the ancient and medieval world.
What was in it?
It was an incredibly complex, highly guarded recipe that sometimes contains 60 or 70 different ingredients, often including roasted snake flesh, opium, and intense spices.
Roasted snake flesh.
It was utilized as a universal, brute force cure-all for severe poisons and the most stubborn internal blockages.
It was the ultimate weaponized, heat-generating drug. They also prescribed specific, potent medicinal plants like tansy and sea ambrosia.
But there is a massive warning label with these plants.
Yes. It notes that using these aggressively strong botanicals requires moisturizing by bathing and oil rubs afterward and eating meat soups with spelt and barley.
Because the physician is playing with fire, literally.
They are that strong.
These plants are so aggressively hot and dry, which is absolutely necessary to burn through the obstruction, that they run a severe risk of collateral damage. If you give a massive dose of tansy to a dry, elderly person, you might melt the blockage, but you also might burn away their last reserves of radical moisture, killing the patient in the process.
So it's a rescue operation immediately followed by a rebuilding operation. You blast the obstruction with the hot herbs, but then you rush in with a moisturizing bath, heavy oils, and a dense wet meat soup to rapidly replenish the moisture you just incinerated.
It's an incredibly delicate, high-stakes balancing act.
And their interventions become even more highly targeted depending on exactly where the patient feels the blockage.
The targeted delivery is fascinating.
Right. If the obstruction is located in the urinary organs or is caused by kidney stones, the text says to add celery seeds, celery roots, or seeds of wild celery to the medicine.
But if it's in the lungs?
If the blockage is higher up, in the lungs, you are instructed to cook the medicine with maidenhair, fern, hyssop, and cassia. They aren't just giving a generic, full-body decongestant.
No, they are utilizing a sophisticated concept of targeted pharmacological delivery. Through centuries of observation, these practitioners believed that certain active plant compounds had a natural affinity for or mechanically migrated toward specific anatomical systems.
So the plant actually knows where to go.
Well, they believed it naturally moved there. Hyssop and maidenhair fern, for instance, were believed to naturally rise and open the porous tissues of the lungs. It is a respiratory prescription that actually persisted in herbalism for centuries.
Okay, if you thought the diet and the herbal drain cleaners were intricate, we are about to enter one of the most conceptually mind-bending parts of this entire text. We are looking at the protocols for exercise.
This is where it gets really weird.
And their approach to physical therapy is like a bizarre, highly tactical, full-body game of seesaw. Listen to this exact quote.
Go for it.
If the elderly suffer from headache, epilepsy, or the pouring of substances in the neck and the frequent ascension of vapors to the head and brain, they should avoid exercise that requires lowering the head.
Makes sense so far.
However, they should exercise by walking, riding, and every exercise that affects the lower half of the body.
And there's the twist.
If you are listening to this right now, think about the last time you had a debilitating migraine. The absolute last thing on earth I want to do with a migraine is go for a brisk hike or bounce up and down on a horse.
I want to lie down in a pitch-black room and not move a muscle.
Exactly. But this text is saying if your head is in agony, you must immediately go exercise your legs. And it gets even wilder.
The leg ache.
Yes. If the illness affects a leg, they should use upper body exercises like weightlifting, throwing stones, and lifting stones. This is the hook we started the show with, throwing heavy stones to cure a leg ache. I need you to completely unpack the underlying mechanics of this seesaw logic, because to a modern mind, it sounds like absolute lunacy.
It sounds completely backwards until you plug it into their model of fluid dynamics. In this system, pain or illness in an organ is rarely seen as an isolated structural failure.
What is it then?
Instead, pain is usually caused by a localized accumulation of morbid, heavy humors or hot, expanding vapors, creating immense pressure in that specific spot.
Let's use a headache example. What is happening in the head?
They believed that due to bad digestion or a humoral imbalance, hot, corrupted vapors were literally ascending from the stomach or lower body and becoming trapped inside the cranium, pressing against the brain.
Like thick, black smoke trapped against the ceiling of a burning room.
Exactly. Now, if you have a headache and you do upper body exercise, or worse, you lower your head toward the ground, you are actively directing more heat, more blood, and more rising vapors to the exact area that is already overwhelmed.
You are adding traffic to a massive traffic jam.
The pressure increases and the headache gets worse.
So why ride a horse?
Because you need to create a powerful diversion. If you vigorously exercise the legs by walking fast or riding, you generate intense, localized heat in the lower extremities.
Okay, so the legs get hot.
In their physics, the body's fluids and vapors are naturally magnetically drawn toward the heat of exertion. By forcing the legs to work, you are literally pulling the morbid, trapped vapors down from the ceiling of the brain, drawing them away from the head, and relieving the pressure.
That is brilliant. You are forcing the traffic to take the southern bypass. You are using the body's own fluid dynamics to drain the swamp from the other end.
It is entirely logically consistent, and the exact same hydraulic principle applies to the bad leg. If the leg is weak, swollen, or full of bad humors, exercising it directly is dangerous.
Because it's already compromised.
Right. The organ is too weak to process those humors, and moving it might cause those stagnant fluids to putrefy.
So instead of resting it, you tell the patient to pick up heavy stones and throw them with their arms.
The intense, sudden upper body exertion acts as a powerful pump. It draws the blood, heat, and vital spirits upward into the chest and arms, actively draining the stagnant, painful humors away from the afflicted leg.
Unbelievable.
Once the bad humors are drawn away and the overall vitality of the body is strengthened through the arm exercise, the text says you gradually include the weak organs in the exercise to strengthen them. You only train the leg once the toxic floodwaters have receded.
But the text slaps a massive glowing warning label onto this seesaw technique. It clearly states that the ill organs may eventually be exercised, but not if they are warm or dry or contain substances that could become putrefied and lack maturation.
That's a vital warning.
Meaning, if the leg is actively inflamed, red hot to the touch, or if the humors haven't been cooked enough by the body to be moved safely, you do not touch it. Why? What happens if you exercise an inflamed leg?
Because if you agitate raw, unmatured, actively putrefying humors, you break containment. You can accidentally spread that putrefaction throughout the entire vascular system, turning a localized leg ache into a systemic, lethal, full-body fever.
Wow.
It's all about timing the intervention perfectly.
It is a stunningly intricate system of hydraulic and thermal management. So far, everything we've discussed has been focused on managing the natural, inevitable imbalance of aging, the slow, predictable loss of heat and moisture.
The baseline changes.
Right. But what about bodies that are fundamentally out of whack from birth? Or bodies that have been pushed to absolute extremes due to severe environmental factors or terrible lifestyle choices? What the text calls distempered bodies.
This brings us to the protocols for the management of the distempered body.
Exactly.
This is a major shift in the text. We are moving out of geriatrics and into acute, extreme constitutional medicine. A distemperament is a state where the body's entire climate has locked into an unnatural pathological extreme.
So the weather hasn't just been bad for a few days, the climate itself is broken.
Precisely.
The text defines this in sections 1 and 2, and it gets a bit mathematically philosophical. It says, a distemperament is based on the balance of the reactants, wetness, and dryness crossed with the absolute dominance of a temperature, either heat or cold.
Let's look at the hot distemperament first.
Right, because the text draws a very sharp, fascinating distinction based on the moisture level. It says a body that is hot and dry will suffer a distemperament that lasts a very long time. But a body that is hot and wet will not stay in that state for long.
Why is that?
Because the heat and the wetness alternate in dominance. Sometimes the wetness dominates and extinguishes the excess heat, and other times the heat dominates and dries up the wetness.
Think of these two states as entirely different meteorological phenomena. A hot and dry temperament is a desert.
A desert is structurally stable.
It stays a desert for a very, very long time. A body stuck in a hot and dry state will suffer a long, slow, chronic, wasting illness. But a hot and wet temperament, that is a tropical storm. It is inherently volatile and unstable. The extreme heat causes the massive amounts of internal moisture to constantly boil over into violent fevers and putrefaction.
But eventually, the storm has to break.
Exactly. Eventually, the raging heat burns up all the available water, turning the body dry, or the massive flood of fluid finally drowns the internal fire, making the body cold. The body is literally at war with itself, swinging wildly between extremes until one force annihilates the other.
And the text points out a truly darkly comedic irony about the person dominated by wetness.
I love this part.
It says a person dominated by excessive wetness will actually find themselves in a better state in old age when wetness becomes balanced.
It's hilarious.
Because the natural aging process inevitably dries you out. If you start your life cursed with way too much wetness, simply surviving to old age actually cures you.
It is perhaps the only time in this entire medical system where the destructive aging process is viewed as a therapeutic intervention.
But let's say they were just dangerously hot. A hot and dry person whose internal heat has become excessive, leading to an irritant temperament and generating lots of yellow bile. Yellow bile is the hot, sharp, angry humor. If someone is burning up with yellow bile, how do they treat this?
The treatment protocol here is aggressive, rapid evacuation. You must pull that toxic heat and boiling bile out of the body through the most direct, immediate routes possible.
Vomiting and severe diarrhea.
Yes.
The text explicitly calls for emesis, which is medically induced vomiting, accomplished by the excessive drinking of hot water, alone or mixed with wine. You drink until the stomach violently rejects it, carrying the bile up with it.
And simultaneously.
Simultaneously, they prescribe intense purgation using compounds like viola jam, tamarind manna, and a plant called Genista purgans. They are literally flushing the entire gastrointestinal system from both ends.
And as if that wasn't enough.
Right, on top of the vomiting and purging, they recommend 3 baths a day. If you are already sick, being purged from both ends and taking 3 baths a day sounds utterly exhausting.
It is tremendously exhausting, which is why the text specifically limits them to lighter exercise. You are putting the body through a massive, artificially induced, full-system cleansing cycle.
And those 3 baths a day aren't hot, relaxing, sweat-inducing baths.
No, not at all.
They are carefully temperature-controlled, tepid, or cooling baths designed to physically, thermochemically draw the trapped heat out of the skin and muscles. And while doing this, they use hepatic openers like absinthe and aloe to ensure the liver and abdomen don't get blocked by the massive volume of bile being flushed through the system.
It's a full medical onslaught.
But here's a point where I really have to pause, because the text issues a profound, almost philosophical warning to the physician regarding these extremely hot bodies.
What's the warning?
It states that the monumental goal of bringing a distempered body back to balance is best suited to those who are calm, self-sufficient, and patient to tolerate the gradual process of bringing their bodies back to balance over a long period, since trying to do it quickly may cause illness.
The patient's principle?
I need you to explain this to me. If someone is dangerously pathologically hot, why is it dangerous to fix them quickly? Shouldn't you cool them down as absolutely fast as possible to save them?
This specific warning reveals the deepest philosophy of classical intervention. It's hard for us to grasp because in our modern emergency rooms, if someone has a dangerously high fever, we pack them in ice and pump them full of antipyretic drugs to smash the fever down instantly.
Right, we want it gone immediately.
But this ancient text views the body as a complex ecosystem that has adapted to its environment.
Right. The internal climate has momentum.
Exactly. If you take a body that has adapted over months or years to being excessively hot and dry, its organs, its blood vessels, its entire metabolic structure have literally formed around and adapted to that fiery reality.
So they're used to the heat.
If you suddenly plunge that internal climate into freezing cold by giving them massive, overwhelming doses of cold medicines or extreme cooling diets, you induce rapid, catastrophic climate change within the body.
It's like taking a glass baking dish out of a 400-degree oven and instantly dropping an ice cube into it. The glass doesn't just cool down, it violently shatters.
That is the perfect mechanical analogy. The sudden shock of extreme cold will cause the adapted organs to seize up. The humors, which were thin and flowing due to the heat, will instantly coagulate into deadly, rock-hard blockages.
The vital spirits will collapse from the shock.
The physician must be calm and patient because they are essentially attempting to terraform a hostile planet. You have to introduce a diet that opposes temperament slowly, methodically, over months or even years, gently coaxing the body's climate back to a temperate, livable zone without triggering a catastrophic, fatal weather event.
Wow. That is deeply, profoundly respectful of the body's structural momentum. And just briefly to cover the other end of the spectrum, for the cold distemperament, the protocol is the exact reverse.
Bombard them with heat.
Right. If the patient is cold and wet, you bombard them with hot foods, warming botanical oils, complex grand pastes, and intense, sweat-inducing baths to literally boil off the excess water. And if they are cold and dry, well, the text simply shrugs and says they should be managed like the elderly, which takes us right back to our donkey milk and sleeping in late.
Because cold and dry is the textbook definition of old age. A cold and dry youth is just prematurely elderly.
Exactly. Now, this delicate patient ecosystem approach applies not just to the temperature and moisture of the body, but to the actual physical mass and structural size of the body.
The physical extremes.
Which leads us to some of the absolute most fascinating, mechanically bizarre, and visually striking remedies in the entire medical text. We're moving into the final sections, treating fullness, fattening the skinny, and thinning the obese.
This is where we see their abstract theories of digestion and metabolism translated into extreme, forceful physical action.
Let's start with the concept of susceptible bodies. The text states that people frequently fall ill due to fullness or the rawness of the humors. If a body is simply too full-stuffed with unprocessed food and unmatured fluids, the treatment is blunt.
Very blunt.
It involves actively delaying food, forcing the body to sweat, and inducing diarrhea with cumin, oxymel, and figs. Basically, stop putting stuff in the top and force everything out the bottom and through the pores until the pressure drops.
Deflate the balloon.
But then we get to the section on fattening of the skinny, and the text identifies the strongest causes of extreme leanness as dryness of the temperament, dryness of the atmosphere, or most specifically, dryness of the mesentery.
The mesentery. This is a vital anatomical structure.
What does it do?
It's the continuous fold of membrane that attaches the intestine to the abdominal wall. And classical physicians correctly identified that this structure and the veins running through it was absolutely crucial for absorbing nutrients from digested food and pulling them into the bloodstream.
Right. They argue that if the mesentery becomes pathologically dry, it loses its ability to absorb food. The nutrients just pass right by it.
So it's an absorption issue.
So if a patient is dangerously skinny and dry, I would assume the treatment is just to sit them down and feed them massive, continuous bowls of heavy, wet, dense food.
Right.
Just force feed them moisture.
That is exactly what a novice would think.
But I'm wrong.
But no, because if the mesentery is too dry to absorb the food, feeding them heavy meals will just create dangerous blockages in the intestines. The food will sit there and rot because the body can't pull it inward. You have to fix the absorption mechanism first.
And the routine they use to fix it is intensely physical. The text dictates a highly specific massage protocol before the patient is allowed to bathe. First, the rubbing must be moderate, between soft and rough, until the skin gets reddish.
Okay, warming it up.
Then the rubbing becomes harder. And finally, the massage is finished by rubbing pitch resin directly onto the patient's skin.
Pitch resin.
I want everyone listening to envision this. Pitch resin. Pine pitch. Thick, incredibly sticky hot tree sap violently rubbed onto reddened raw skin.
It sounds like medieval torture.
It gets worse. This is immediately followed by moderate exercise. An instantaneous plunge into a bath, aggressive drying with rough towels, rubbing with oil, and finally, if the patient hasn't passed out and can tolerate it, pouring freezing cold water directly over their bodies. What on earth is the medical logic behind slavering a starving, dangerously skinny person in hot pine pitch?
It is undeniably aggressive, but it is flawlessly logical within their fluid framework. If the deep internal tissues in the mesentery are too dry and shriveled to absorb food, you need to forcefully, mechanically pull blood, heat, and moisture from the core of the body outward into those starving peripheral tissues.
You have to physically irrigate the dry field.
Exactly. The moderate to hard rubbing physically draws the blood outward. That's why the skin turns red. But rubbing isn't enough to keep it there.
Hence the pitch.
The pitch resin is intensely sticky, tacky, and inherently hot. By coating the skin in pine pitch, they believed it acted like a powerful poultice, creating a localized vacuum of heat and suction on the surface of the body that aggressively sucked the deep humors outward, forcing them to fill and engorge the dry, empty tissues.
It's ancient cupping therapy, but applied as a full-body sticky suit. The text even specifically notes that the massage should only end when tissue engorgement starts to disappear.
They want it swollen.
They're literally standing there, watching the patient's skin swell with blood and humors and trying to capture it in the tissues before it retreats.
And that explains the final, shocking step, the freezing cold water plunge at the end.
It's a trap.
That is the final trap. You spend all this time in agony drawing all the heat, blood, and vital moisture to the surface tissues using friction and pitch. If you just let them sit there, the blood will eventually drain back to the core.
But the cold water?
The sudden shock of freezing water snaps the pores shut instantly, locking the blood and moisture into the outer tissues so it cannot retreat. You have forced the body to distribute its nutrition to the starving extremities.
It is exactly like priming a dry, porous canvas before you paint it. You seal the surface so it can finally hold onto the material you are about to add.
That's a perfect analogy. You are structurally forcing the body to hold onto its mass.
Which makes the treatment for extreme obesity thinning of the obese so brilliant in its absolute mirror image opposite approach.
The exact reverse.
If gaining weight is about pulling nutrients into the tissues and locking them there, losing weight is treated purely as a mechanical plumbing issue. The text declares the treatment involves acceleration of food's exit from the stomach and intestines so that it does not get completely absorbed.
It is the anti-mesentery approach.
Yeah.
You must not allow the body to have the time or the heat to extract anything of value from the food.
The protocol is fascinating. They instruct the obese patient to consume a large quantity of low nutritious food. So, massive physical bulk without any vital heat or value. And then, they mandate bathing frequently before eating and engaging in fast exercise.
Fast transit.
I find this conceptually mind-blowing. The way they treat weight loss here is by inducing a constant artificial state of high-speed transit. You eat huge amounts of heavy material, and then you do fast, jerky exercise so the food basically rushes through the plumbing before the mesentery can grab any of it.
If you take a step back and think about it, modern bariatric surgery, or even sort of the new modern weight loss drugs, essentially attempt to do the exact same thing. Physically, surgically, or chemically limit the body's ability to extract and absorb nutrients from a large volume of food.
They were just trying to do it naturally.
The classical physicians were just attempting to achieve that same malabsorption through extreme lifestyle and mechanical manipulation.
And they don't rely purely on exercise. They attack the fat chemically. They prescribe applying disintegrating oils and pastes, such as small Arabian pea, which the text helpfully notes is Sorelia bituminosa, a plant also known historically as pitch trefoil, known for its harsh cutting qualities.
They use the antidote again, right?
Yeah, they also use intense massage medicine and the teriyaki antidote we mentioned earlier to generate massive internal heat to melt the fat. And finally, the daily morning routine, drinking vinegar with murree on an empty stomach in the morning.
Notice the stark contrast in materials. For the skinny person, they use sticky pine pitch to seal and engorge the tissues. For the obese person, they use disintegrating botanical pastes and vinegar.
What does vinegar do here?
Vinegar is powerfully cold, wildly dry, and intensely penetrating. Drinking raw vinegar mixed with the salty, fermented murree on an absolutely empty stomach is designed to literally dissolve, cut through, and melt thick, accumulated fat and cold phlegm in the stomach walls before any new food is even introduced.
They are sending in a highly acidic chemical solvent to strip the pipes bare every single morning.
It is aggressive, biological, structural engineering.
It is so incredibly visceral. Every single intervention we've talked about today, Whether it's the exact temperature of a bathwater, the specific grazing habits of a donkey, or the literal direction you throw a heavy rock, is a highly calculated, theoretically sound attempt to manipulate the physical, fluid, elemental reality of the human body.
And I think that is the true lasting beauty of this medical system. We, with our modern scientific advantages, can look back and smile at the idea of rubbing pine pitch on someone to make them gain weight.
Sure, it sounds funny now.
But what we are really observing in this text is a system of medicine that was deeply, profoundly, almost unimaginably attentive to the human condition. Nothing was random. Every single symptom, a dry patch of skin, a craving for sweet wine, a sluggish morning, was a vital clue to the state of the internal weather.
Everything meant something.
And every plant, every animal, and every physical action was a carefully calibrated tool used to change that weather. The physician was engaged in a constant, highly dynamic, respectful dialogue with the patient's entire ecosystem.
Which brings us to the end of this incredible, exhausting deep dive into the classical medical mind. We've gone from the careful, quiet administration of honeyed bread at 3 p.m. for the drying elderly to the complex hydraulic mechanics of drawing vapors away from a sore leg by lifting weights to the aggressive, high-stakes terraforming of hot and cold distemperaments.
It's a humbling reminder that the human desire to understand, categorize, map, and heal the body has always been intensely sophisticated and rigorously logical, even when the underlying physics they were working with were completely different from our own.
And as we wrap up, I want to connect this directly back to you listening to this right now. In our incredibly fast-paced modern era, we are so often looking for a silver bullet.
We really are.
We want a single mass-produced pill to fix our sleep, or a universal, heavily marketed superfood that will magically optimize our health regardless of who we are, where we live, or what our bodies are actually experiencing. We've traded this incredible, hyper-specific, individualized attention for standardized convenience.
That's a very fair point.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Think about your own daily routine right now. How much of what you eat, how you move your body, or even the exact hour you choose to go to sleep is actually tailored to the specific, unique temperament of your own body on this exact day.
Probably not much.
If one of these ancient, patient, observant practitioners walked into your house right now, looked at your exact physical state, your unique balance of heat, your specific level of moisture, the exact nature of your aches and pains, what bizarre, terrifying, but ultimately hyper-personalized prescription would they write for you? Would you be throwing stones in your backyard? Would you be drinking vinegar on an empty stomach? Or would you be taking a long, slow nap covered in warm perfume?
It certainly makes you reconsider that massive glass of ice-cold cucumber water you were about to drink, doesn't it?
It really does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.